Hi, I'm Daniel Klug. I got started in LA just kind of like doing tape digitizing, like basically being a PA, running around with, tapes and trying to get these things to the editors and stuff. And I one day stumbled upon the 3D room. Like every post production house has one of these where it's like there's a cave and in it is like all the nerds and they're working on this like magical software called Maya and they're just making insanely amazing things. And I'm like, I need to do that. That's amazing. And so yeah, that was my goal. Like I'm just gonna try to learn CG. I ended up taking some satellite classes from um Gnomon, and I
Mm,
remember that was so expensive. Gnomon's so expensive. I mean, it's great if you can do it, but yeah, I
sure.
couldn't afford it at the time. Um, but then I kind of like because the job I had so much downtime, I kind of worked my way into that room. I would like ask the lead modeler, I'm like, "Hey, can you show me how to move around in this?" And I just self-taught.
Hmm,
And so I would spend so many hours like kind of after work was over just like messing around and like modeling the lamp that's on my desk and the desk and everything. And then
hmm.
and then one day my boss saw what I was doing. He's like, "Hey, do you want to work on this Star Wars thing?" And I was like, "Yes." And it was the Star Wars Episode 3 DVD.
Oh.
And it turned out like so it was the DVD menu too. So you put in the DVD and it's like you'd see the
Ah.
ships flying and it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I got to fly one of those ships.
Huh.
And then like I had to help model like some room or whatever. And
Yeah.
it was amazing. And yeah, so that was my I got the taste of like CG and animation and it's like I just got to keep doing this. And so I looked around, I like try to find okay, what school should I go to?
Hmm.
And at the time, Animation Mentor had just started up, but it was also kind of like a school online. This was also really weird,
That's
right?
true.
This is like
Yeah, yeah.
2007, 6, 7. So it's the early days of the internet.
Yeah.
YouTube I think was not even a baby yet,
Hmm.
and but a friend of mine convinced me and I signed up and I did it. And I finished Animation Mentor like 2009, 9. And I remember too, um, oh gosh. Oh man, I don't know if I should include this. Okay, I'll include it. Okay.
Okay, okay.
So right before I graduated, I remember going to this convention called CGCon in 2009.
Hmm.
And in it was like people were trying to get like this animation convention off the ground.
Yeah.
And at it, they had two recruiters. Valve and Blizzard were there.
Hmm.
And I remember showing my reel, and it's like in its infancy. I had like up to class 4. I was still working on my short film.
Yeah.
I showed them both, and I was like, I want to work for you guys one day. And then they both said, you got a long way to go. Go work for like Sony or DreamWorks for a few years, then give us a call. It was like such a baller move. I'm
I
like,
know.
really? Oh man, okay. I got to get in a film. I got to really understand what's happening.
Interesting.
Uh, let's see. And then after that, I was like, okay, kind of rejected, but like I had to keep going. So I finished my short film, graduated. Yeah, finished my short film,
Hmm.
quit my job, went out on the job market. Nothing. There was just no. It was just like right after the crash when there was like the movie industry was going down, and it just started coming back up a little bit. I remember animating a couple more shots on my own because someone else told me like, "Hey, your work's still not that great, so you got to
Hmm.
keep working on that." And so I did. Boom! I got lucky and I got into the Rhythm and Hughes apprenticeship program,
Oh, nice.
and we worked on Hop, which man, it is it's a fun movie to cut your teeth on, right? Like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was long hour, 100-hour weeks for like 6 months. But I knew that even then, after working there, I wasn't allowed to have my shots for my reel
Hmm.
until it came out on DVD. And they're like, it's not going to come out on DVD for like another 3 years or something. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have a reel to get me another job after this one ends.
Right, right.
So I kept going to school. I enrolled into iAnimate then and
Uh-uh.
like took classes by Jamal Bradley, talking about him earlier, Luke Randall, and they taught me lip sync, polish, all this stuff. And it's like I kept growing, even though I was working on movies, like a film. There was so much more for me to understand and grow,
Hmm.
especially design language and posing. I was bad. I was really bad at it. But then toward the end of my time at Rhythm and Hughes, people are getting their jobs at like Blue Sky. I applied to
Mm,
Disney trying to get into Taldev. They
of
rejected me. They're like,
course.
yeah, you're not ready. And I
Yeah.
was like, what am I gonna do? I ended up finding this class up in San Francisco. It was the
Mm,
Animation Collaborative,
right.
but they would only teach in person. So what we ended up doing is like, and I say we because me and three buddies piled into a car every Friday night
That's
and
so
drove
crazy.
up to San Francisco.
That
This
is
is
crazy.
500 miles. Stayed at a in-laws house Friday night. Saturday morning, we'd drive into Emeryville, cross the street from Pixar. We would take this class until like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and then drive home. So it
Oh,
was a
dude,
1,000 miles, at least 1,000 miles,
that is so
round
crazy.
trip every week for 15 weeks.
Dude,
My God.
that's crazy.
But it worked because halfway through that class, I went to CTN. I got an interview with the recruiter from Disney,
Hmm.
and he was like, "Oh, this reel's 10 times better. I'll get you in." And then they offered me a job as a regular animator,
That's
which is
crazy.
weird, right? Going from like rejected as a Tal dev to then like doing I did a lot of work. I finished like 3 more shots, and then I was able to put in some stuff from Alvin because I was like, I'm gonna password protect it and just show him in person, so it's
Mm-mm.
different. It helped. My God, it helped. And so then that's how I got into Disney on Ralph 1. And it was
Nice.
like a lot of video game related stuff. And they, it's a little pandering because that was Ralph,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
man, Ralph is still one of my favorite
Oh,
movies
for sure.
just because of that.
Yeah.
And yeah. And maybe, okay, maybe if we have time, I'll share the story about how like, I almost got fired. But, but I managed to hang in there. Yeah, almost got fired from Disney. But then later, hung in there, worked on Big Hero 6. No,
Right.
sorry, Frozen, Big Hero
Oh, right,
6.
right.
Then instead of going on to Zootopia, I got supervisor on Moana. So then I went into pre-production on that
Mm,
and worked on Moana, supervising the crowds, and then Moana's parents, and that was really fun.
that's awesome.
And then right off that into Ralph 2, supervising again for the crowds on that show as well, and that was really fun. The netizens, net users, like
Yeah,
all
yeah.
those guys. C3PO was my character.
That's
All the
awesome.
C3PO shots in Ralph 2 are mine. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't think I have him on my reel. That's crazy.
That's right. Yeah, I
Uh,
think I've seen it. Huh.
yeah, and then all the while and then I kept going. Like worked on Frozen 2, and then
Yeah.
Raya and the Last Dragon. I can't wait to see how Raya turned out.
Yeah.
Man, I'm ecstatic. I'm really jazzed to see how that turned out.
Yeah, yeah.
But then along came 2020,
Hmm.
the year for change.
For sure.
And then also this calling, this beckoning of like, hey, there's this opportunity over at Blizzard, and it is perfect for you. And they were right. So I can't talk too much about it, but I am working on Overwatch 2
Mm-mm.
and having a blast, time of my life,
That's
and it
awesome.
feels like the perfect fit. And I've learned so much in the industry, and that's kind of like my biggest journey, going through it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm curious. Like, well, I think some students are curious of like, well, I guess kind of like why you wanted to transition from feature to game, and then how has that been in terms of like how's it shifted over in terms of maybe, I don't know, like work life or like your workflow or job responsibilities. Like, how did that transition
Over from Disney to Blizzard.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, okay, so here's the weird thing. Like, what I was doing at Disney was primarily technical. I would do so much
Okay.
technical stuff. Like, the kinds of shots I got were usually like these technical nightmares, where characters are fighting or climbing on each other, or like there's just some crazy moving camera and stuff is happening. And I love those challenges. I love like digging under the hood and figuring out, how to solve this problem. Because I think every shot is kind of like this puzzle that you have to figure out and solve.
Right.
And there's multiple ways to solve it. And then also the way I was working on the crowds in both Moana and Ralph 2 were very similar to how games are made, where like if you wanted to make like a character move around in a game, you would be doing things like breaking apart a whole animation into things like the legs moving and then the upper body moving and stuff.
Right.
And so I was no stranger to any of that. And so like there was almost this frictionless transplant over to games
Hmm.
because I was already sort of doing that stuff. Like
Interesting.
I could imagine someone who doesn't really understand piecing together parts of a body performance
Yeah.
to be able to then have to like kind of think about that having a harder time. But no, it just felt like I was talking the same language, so there
Interesting.
wasn't much of a drastic change there.
Hmm.
And then yeah, I can't talk about the stuff I'm actually doing.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
but like it also the stuff that I did at Disney helped a lot. So yeah, everything just fit so perfectly.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is one of those, yeah, could not say no.
Dude, that's awesome. And I think you've told me that Blizzard was like kind of like your passion like studio, right? Like or the
Oh
studio
yeah.
that you always wanted to work at.
Yeah, I
Gotcha.
mean, when you grow up on Blizzard games,
Yeah,
ah, there's just something magical about it. It's like
I'm
I
sure.
grew up on Diablo 2 and StarCraft 2.
Yeah, yeah.
I got bit by the WoW bug. I actually, oh man, I had to quit WoW in order to finish Animation Mentor. Again, this is one of those things where like animation is going to be the king in your life. If you go down this road and you want to be an animator and you want to get good and learn, the
Mhm.
only way you're going to be able to do it is if you put in hours,
For sure.
right? And I remember having a hard choice to make between, do I keep playing WoW? I was raiding. It was like Wrath of the Lich King, man. It was like the best expansion too. Do I keep raiding or do I focus on my animation? And
Yeah.
I saw myself slipping in
Mm,
animation. So
interesting.
it's like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna spend this whole weekend just animating. And then that turned in, okay, next weekend, I'm not done yet. I gotta keep animating, gotta keep animating. And then the WoW time just kind of dropped into
Interesting.
enough where it's like my guild's like, hey dude, you're not raiding, so we're gonna give your spot to somebody else. And it's like, okay. And then I had to let it go. And then I did and just kept animating. And
Wow.
that was actually the way out of the WoW bug. But then dang, Shadowlands just dropped and oh my
And
gosh.
you have to go back into it. Well, now it's
I'm
for
trying.
work. Now it's for work.
Now it's for work, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
No,
Yep.
but you make a good point in terms of like making sacrifices. I think that's like a big key that we always talk about with students. Is like, yes, we definitely advocate for work-life balance, being healthy in that regard of like making sure you get rest and your friends and family and whatnot. But at some point, you're gonna have to make sacrifices with whether that be weekends or weeknights. And your case with like going to animation collaborative, now that's like an extreme level of like making sacrifices to kind of like further your growth as an animator, as an artist. um,
Yeah.
do you have any tips for that for students to kind of like, because like even your addiction, not addiction, but like your love for a WoW is like
No, that's fair.
it was hard to drop, right? So how would you
Right.
recommend
Yeah, well,
students to get out of that funk of like not wanting to get in front of their computer and animate? Do you have any like tips on how you kind of overcame that?
wow. There were man, the real issue is motivation.
Mm,
Like what are you more motivated to do? And I did find myself, and maybe I got lucky, but I found myself every once in a while I'd be playing WoW and it's like I'm running around on my human warlock and I
mhm,
noticed like the run cycle was like just had like this hitch in it. And it bugged me. Like I started to see it. Like the more I learned about animation,
mm,
the more I started kind of analyzing the animation that I saw playing WoW.
interesting.
And then also like in every other thing, like in animated movies I was watching too, but like and especially in the games I played, like so much to the point where so WoW wasn't the only game I played. I remember also playing like Fallout 3.
Mm,
And my gosh, Fallout 3 should be played first person because if you ever go third person and you see how your character runs, kind of glides along the landscape, like as an animator, it's like I can't play it anymore, but just because I see it's like, oh man, it's not contacting the ground
yeah.
properly and stuff. And it's okay. It's not the focus of Fallout, but like I would notice it again. WoW is pretty good with its animation, but
Sure.
like if you dig, you can probably find some areas where it's like, yeah, that there was a hitch there, and it would kind of inspire me to work on
Interesting.
my shot because I would be like, I, like I could animate like that, like, and then I would alt tab, I'd have Maya open. It's just,
Interesting.
I don't know, like it was a motivator to try to at least be that good. And
Mm,
every once in a while, when I'd see a mistake in, maybe not a mistake, but just kind of like like a shortcut that was taken in the
sure.
animation,
Yeah.
I'd be like, I wouldn't let that slip. I would do it, like, and I'd fix that. And so, and I would put myself to the test, and I would animate. I don't know, like if it works, it worked for me. I don't know if that works for everybody else.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
sometimes you just get carried away by the gameplay. And you're just like, oh
Uh,
my gosh,
yeah.
amazing. But yeah, I started noticing animation a lot, and yeah, especially in games that I loved. And it's like, oh man, I could do a way better job than that.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, I'll just animate, because it's like, if I want to work for them and then bring to that studio like a better level of animate, well, thinking that I would be able to do that,
Yeah, yeah.
like the only way to do it really is to be a better animator,
Hmm.
to be useful to studios like that.
Hmm.
So I kind of did it I was compelled to,
Interesting.
in a sense.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's like whatever motivation you find, like whatever shape or form that might be. And in your case was like seeing animation within whatever that you were playing. Yeah, so I think like for students, I think yeah, just like basically finding whatever motivates you.
Yeah, it's like, what do you like about animation?
Right.
Right. Like I talked earlier about, like, animation is like solving problems.
Mhm.
And I have a very sort of like, I have one of these brains where it's like, as soon as a puzzle comes up, it's like I have to solve it before I can move on.
Interesting.
And so it just sticks in my brain. And as soon as I start seeing like, this one shot is the problem, it's like all I can do, to just think about it and crunch this until it turns into something that I solve and I finish.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Like, I know that not everyone sees it like that, because animation can be daunting. Like, I've been in those situations. Like, to be honest, dude, I didn't understand body mechanics like truly
Hmm.
until, I want to say, in the middle of Frozen.
Interesting.
And it's like I had worked on 3 movies up to that. I had worked on the Disney movie, and then really didn't truly understand what body mechanics is. And I think there was like this aha moment.
Hmm.
Like, and this happens in animation a lot, where you're like kind of struggling up this hill and you're like, I don't get it. And you're like, why doesn't it look good? And you're looking at the graphic and you're like, that looks fine. And you look at your keys and you're like, they look fine. Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
But then like something will click if you just keep like, I don't know, in my case, just bashing my head against it over and over until it's like, or like tilting it upside down until like all of a sudden it just clicks and I see it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do that with every time there's something where I don't get. And that's why I started learning programming, because it's like, I wish I had this tool that did this thing. And I started learning how to program, and it's like, none of this is working. And I would just bash my head against it until like I started making things that are useful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wish I motivated myself to like get more technical with a lot of things. I
Yeah.
feel like I feel like I get like there halfway, and then once I like hit that roadblock, I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I should have
man.
learned it.
Hey, how often do you look at the chat? Should we pay attention to the
Oh yeah,
questions
yeah.
over there?
Why don't we some questions? I think someone by Scribble949 is like a huge fan of you. I think it says you're my hero. I can't go on without saying without you saying hello to me.
Hey, they might be a fan of yours.
I don't know. It
We
says
can both say hello to Scribble.
yeah. Hey,
949.
Scribble949. Hello. It says
Hello.
yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Derek says 100-hour weeks seems like a nightmare.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was real. And also, one thing I will say about the 100-hour weeks, they did pay for it.
Hmm.
Rhythm and Hughes was not one of those studios that would be like, hey, this is due Monday, do what you gotta do. Like, no, they realized, they're like, hey, we understand this is gonna keep you here until 3 a.m. Don't worry, we're paying golden time. There were a couple weeks of golden time. Which helped a lot. I will say I made bank on that movie. But yeah, don't work for free. Don't work for free. Man, it makes me sad when I hear stories about studios that are like, it's due Monday, do what you gotta do. We don't pay overtime. And it's like Friday at 6. And they just gave you like 3 days worth of notes. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
It's just, studios like that are just taking advantage of their
sure.
animators. Or not just animators. It's like, this happens to everyone.
Mhm.
Everyone in the pipeline. And it's, we can all be stronger together if we all say no.
Yep.
And you don't necessarily have to have a union to do that. Though in Disney's case, a union helps, because like Disney will never let anyone ghost hours.
Oh, for sure.
I remember on Ralph 1, the producer like walked in and was like all hands meeting. Walked in. If we find anyone ghosting hours, you will be in trouble with lawyers. And it was like,
Wow.
whoa, like this, they take that seriously.
Yeah.
So I was really happy to hear that. It's
Oh, for
like, no,
sure.
just if you gotta work it, you tell your producer, you work it, you get paid.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's like,
No, it's a
cool.
good
They
point.
take care of the people.
Yeah, because students have to understand. I think that's like a early mistake that a lot of students can get into, especially when they're very young in the industry and they want to prove everyone, and that kind of just not even knowing sometimes, like they just like end up like getting so focused and so tunnel visioned, and they just want to be like, oh, I gotta finish it, I gotta impress, or else I'm gonna lose my job. This is my first job, blah blah. But I think they have to understand why ghosting can be negative, and you can explain why you should try to prevent ghosting.
Yeah. Well, so the biggest reason is like they bid producers are always bidding shots, right? So they'll say, "Hey, this shot is going to cost 5 days of work," right? But if 5, let's see. If it turns out as you're getting into it, like this is actually going to be 7 days of work, like it's like, okay, all this week and maybe Monday, Tuesday next week,
Mm-hmm.
you should say something like, "Hey, I think this is going to take 2 extra days." And and you might actually get some pushback and say like, no, we only bid 5. But the thing is, if it is actually 7 days worth of work, but then you just spend extra hours every day doing it and it comes in at 5, that's just another data point for them to be like, see, they're just complaining. Of course they got it done in 5 days, right? And then they think, okay, every shot that looks like this can be done in 5 days because this person did it, right? And then just multiply that by like every animator on the crew, which might be 100 animators or more, across every shot on the film. And if every shot is underbid like that, everyone ends up crunching because the next person comes along and they're like, "There's a 5-day shot," and that person's like, "No, clearly this is a 7-day shot," and they're like, "Nope, it's 5, and that's all you get." It's like, so, you have even less power to come back and say like, "No, this is actually 7," because look, they have all this data where of course that's a 5.
Right.
And then movies just get crunched and crunched and crunched, and because people are getting it done. And the crazy thing is like, we're not skimping on quality at all. Like animators are the, like, hands down easily the most, like, oh gosh, how do you phrase this? Like, they put so much soul and love into their work where it's like they will die before their shot leaves their hands looking bad, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure, you know what, every department probably does this.
Sure.
But like, because I'm an animator, I know this for a fact. As an animator, like, we will not let it go if it's not good and perfect. Like, shots are really never done, they're just delivered. So
Yeah.
yeah, and it's easy to kind of like dig into that animator brain and be like, "Hey, this has to be done here," and the only thing you can do is just put more hours into it, and where you think you can.
Right.
But I think everyone needs to stay firm with this notion of like, look, if this is actually 7 days of work, especially if this is like 10 days of work, this is 2 weeks of work, but they're saying like it's got to be done Friday.
Right.
And if they're saying no overtime also, like, the only lever we can pull is to really just be really honest about it. And if they still demand it, deliver less quality, which is so that's also BS, because then it's like when your review comes up, then it's
Right.
like, why are your shots looking so good? Like, it's a slippery slope, right? Like, then how do you dig yourself out of that?
Right.
And it's like, we all have to do it together. That's really the
Exactly.
only way to do it.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of students that go into the industry, and after like a year or two, you'll probably start getting it. Because when you first get it, you're like so like starry-eyed, and you're like, it's like, oh, I love it. And then eventually you're like, I don't want to animate. Just kidding. Okay, let's see. Let's see. I think there was a question that someone asked, are you doing gameplay animation or cinematic? Can you answer that?
Okay. I'm not in the cinematics team. I'm on team 4. So I'm not doing any of the pre-rendered cinematics.
Gotcha.
I can say that. I am working on the game. and that's all I can say.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry, but that was actually by design, because I do think that excuse me, I do think that gameplay, like game design in and of itself, is like this next level challenge, especially for me,
Hmm.
where uh, like I want, like, to be honest, I think Disney makes some of the most beautiful cinematics out there, right?
Sure.
Like their movies are like just hour and a half, like 90-minute spectacles, and it's gorgeous.
Hmm.
And Blizzard competes, right? Like all the Blizzard cinematics are amazing. But like in that back of my head, I was thinking like, but game development, right? Like what about this whole aspect to this medium that is interactivity, right? Like having something where a player can like hit forward and then
Hmm.
feel something,
Mm.
right? That's the part that was really calling to me. I think there's this like next level, I don't know, yeah, I can only call it a calling,
Hmm.
because I don't know how else to say it, but yeah, it's something about interaction and how you can have almost like a communication, like a dialogue almost,
Hmm.
with an audience member. And it's
Yeah.
not just one way, right? Where it's like when you watch a movie, you sit down and you're just watching. But imagine if you're playing a horror game,
Hmm.
right? And it's like you got this dark, scary hallway and stuff, and it's there. But as a player, it's like you have to press forward in order to experience it. So like there's this two-way communication happening where it's like the player injects, and then the narrator, or like the narrative of the game and the game designers, like plays out,
Hmm.
at the player's speed, and how they interact with the world. I don't know, there's so much
Interesting.
there that I wanted to like dig into and figure out. And Blizzard is like the best game developers in the land, so
Hmm.
yeah.
No, that's awesome. Yeah.
That, not saying Overwatch 2 is anything to do with horror or scary
Ooh.
hallways. That's not a thing. It's just I'm thinking out loud about like what I like about interaction and design.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that sounds super cool. Yeah, like I said, there's something to like storytelling within the game, and like how specific you can get with the characters within game, which I think is like super cool to see. Versus like features are very kind of like you get what you're given, kind of thing. Like you either connect with the character and you don't, right? But in terms of games, like there's some aspect to like you kind of grow with the character from the beginning stage, and you kind of like just play through this arc, and then what you're doing is essentially kind of like helping that to feel more real to the character, to the players. So I think that's like the
Yep.
cool aspect of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And there's some games out there that just hit that on the head, like with so much force that it's undeniable,
Hmm.
right? Like a game that I really like that kind of does that is What Remains of Edith Finch.
Hmm.
Right? It's like this really obscure kind of like storytelling game where you're walking around this house, but then like you start playing out these memories and stuff, and it's like the way the animation works and the way you interact with the worlds
Yeah.
is just like, it's perfect. It's amazing.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm very curious what you're working on, especially on Overwatch.
I know.
2.
I wish I
I'm
could
just
say.
very curious.
All I can say is I can't wait for y'all to see it, because it's
Yeah.
going to be amazing.
Gotcha. Let's see. I don't know. Let's see. Okay. I'm trying to read all the other questions. What coding language are you learning? Kelly says.
Oh, coding language. So I started learning Mel
Uh-huh.
because of Aaron Carousel's scripts.
Yep.
So is this something that like your students know about?
They should know. A lot of them should know about the scripts. Yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. Aaron Carousel's got this website. He's a Pixar animator now. Like,
Hmm.
well, like now he's been there for like 15 years or 10 years or something. But like, he's got this webpage that's basically been there since animation was invented.
Oh yeah.
And it's the same. And all his scripts still work, and they're amazing. They're
Yeah.
like the like axe slice curves, right?
Oh, yeah.
It will always insert a key rather than setting a key, which preserves your tangents.
Mhm.
It's perfect. And there was one thing that I had to start messing with, because it was like, I wish this worked like a certain way. And so I had to like start reading the code and Man, that was so hard to read. But I remember like I spent a summer working on this thing, and then I was showing one of the programmers at work at Disney,
Hmm.
and he's like, "You should do this in Python. It's a lot easier."
Mm,
Python, okay, like I'll look into it. And then Python is like, it's like plain English almost. It's
interesting.
just uh for each enlist, or if this then that. Like it's it's so
Interesting.
like I don't know, as a non-programmer, easier to kind of like make that first step and understand like
Huh.
what I'm even doing.
Yeah.
And then there were a couple Python scripts out there that I could uh, sort of decode. Well, like you'd look at their code and see how they're constructing, like, oh, get all the keyframes, and then
Yeah.
oh, scale all the keyframes and stuff. And then I would start putting my own commands together to be able to like move keyframes around. Or at one point, I was like breaking apart the rigs and then turning them into proxy rigs, and then
Mhm.
evaluating like skin weights and stuff. Oh man, it gets deep.
Interesting.
But yeah, so I'm all Python now. And now like, well, kind of starting to learn C++, because if you want to do something and make it like really performant, like, really fast,
Hmm.
you got to do C++, which I'm not looking forward to that jump, because again, I'm self-taught. Like I've never gone to school for, well, for anything really. I mean, this is probably like a little like tidbit that I forgot to mention, but I never went to college.
Hmm.
I took a couple of junior college courses.
Yeah, yeah.
Learning, like my first class I ever discovered Maya with was this junior college in San Jacinto, where the teacher was a guy who worked on The Last Starfighter,
Oh, really?
which is like the first movie that had CG in it.
Yeah.
That like was his claim to fame. But and then nothing until I got to LA, like years and years later.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I'm self-taught with everything. Like I don't have a proper degree or any of that. So it's like I have to really tear things apart and see how they're made in context. And
Yeah.
again, this is also why I think the way we teach animation now is so perfect, because like this is how I would want to learn, right? Like just
Mhm.
from someone who's doing it, telling me like this is how you do what I do.
Mm.
Like, man, this is amazing. It's
Yeah.
not, yeah, like I could never learn animation by reading a book.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's funny because like I think for so long we've like education, especially online like animation curriculums are based around like kind of like lecture kind of things of like this is what you should do
Yeah.
to do this and that, and then also the animation survival kit book, whatever, right? Which everyone used
Yep.
at some point in their lives. And then I feel like as technology just like grew more and more, and then more type of like I think more animators got used to like working with technology, they start to kind of developing like their own workflows and understanding animation in a slightly more like a different way, more modern way. So I feel like the type of education we provide now, I feel like there's so much freedom that we can do to like unlock people's like puzzles or struggles that they're having with animation, because I feel like some students just don't like necessarily understand the same way as other students might understand it, so
Yeah.
I think it's super
Yeah.
cool to like to experiment with like, well, what makes sense to you in your mind, right?
Yep. I like that too, where it feels like there's not an infinite number of ways where someone could misunderstand animation.
Sure.
So generally it's like when someone's like, I'm trying to do this and this is the results I'm getting, a lot of the time you can kind of zero in on, oh, I know how you're thinking about it. And
Mhm.
you can kind of teach them how to think about animation differently.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, I see what you're trying to do here. What you need to do is think about it this way, or like
Mhm.
use this instead. Yeah, that feels a little bit more, I don't know, it feels like a shorter path, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
like you
I
could
agree.
just reach to the student and be like, oh, I see what you're doing, do this.
Yeah. Gotcha. Let me see, double check.
Oh, someone asked, is ghosting working off the clock? Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Gotcha.
Don't work off the clock.
And there's a person, just chill. Oh yeah, so this person, they like work on like programming kind of for specifically for animation. So this person actually asked me in my stream not too long ago about, are there things that you kind of like features that you actually think that it's missing from current animation software like Maya or Animbot, or like, what are there things that you wish like it had maybe that you would love to see? Because like this is the person who wants to make that as like
Ooh.
their passion. So
Like there's features missing from Animbot or Maya that would make animation easier.
yeah, or yeah, anything that you would just want to see.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't think top of my head.
Wow. So the things that I'm making, which is fun. So let's see if I should go down this spiel. So have you heard of this blog called justtodosomething.bad.com?
No.
This is blog by Raf Anzevin, who was the guy who invented Setup Machine, which is like this auto rigger for like if you had a model of a character, you could just like run it through this plugin. It would add the skeleton, all the controls and everything. But he started like thinking about new ways of rigging where it's like, what if the rig only existed when you needed it, like when you selected the control and then started moving it. And then this is also like a way of just getting faster, right? So that way you don't have to like wait for a rig to evaluate because the rig just literally doesn't exist. But while he's doing that, he's also able to change like what's the parent. Like, so imagine like, for example, a full body IK system in which you would like grab an arm and start moving it, right? And if it like pulled the shoulder and then pulled the chest, right? That's awesome sometimes.
Yeah.
But then sometimes you don't want it. But like imagine if this was super easy to choose between.
Interesting.
Or like what if you had a character who's like doing a handstand and you just want to like rotate the whole character but from the point of the hand.
Right.
And I understand that like Animbot does have a thing called like temporary pivot where you could do that.
Yeah.
In posing. But like on the fly, just being able to reorder like what's the parent, what are the children, and all that stuff. I think that concept is super powerful because like on demand, you're just deciding, okay, this is the parent control that I want to move, and everything is moving around it or scaling from it or whatever. And he's got this whole C-graph talk on the thing, and it's amazing. I think this combined with Richard Lico's method of animating, where Richard Lico is the animation director of Destiny, or at least Destiny 1. He used to be at Bungie. He now started his own studio, and he made oh my gosh, it's the one with the little mouse.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I just can't.
Yeah, like oh man, it's on the tip of my tongue. Moss. Yeah. So he made Moss, and he's got a couple videos online showing his workflow for space switching, where he'd be like, you just grab this animation, space switch it, copy paste, move it over to the side, and all of a sudden like everything, like his armor's jiggling on the character as it's walking, and it's like super fast.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm thinking, if you had like that kind of power of just having animation of one control in relation to another control, being able to, I don't know, like see any part of your rig in that with that lens, where it's like, okay, I want like the entire character, but in the context of the shoulder. So that way I can add some like extra twist to the chest, but it's all coming from the shoulder. And it's like you would reframe the animation to now be a child of the shoulder as you're like moving the graph editor and like offsetting some keys and then scaling them and everything. This is how my brain thinks about animation, right? Like it gets complicated, but the thing is, like, if I'm able to like fire these steps in a certain order, I can do this whole action of like doing chest shoulder moves with like 3 clicks in a minute, rather than having to animate this whole thing for a couple hours. It's a way of thinking about how your performance is constructed.
Interesting.
And then how you get to that result.
Dude, I'm trying to like wrap my head around that.
I know, like we need more examples, but like, so here, can I share a link, I guess?
Yeah, actually you can, because are you on? Oh yeah, sure, you can just share a link. Maybe I can just
do something bad. Like at least people should know about this, because I think this is a cool
you can send it through Discord. Do you have?
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Here's my C-graph presentation. He says and Discord.
Gotcha. This one.
This is a thing where like when you're thinking about you want to reframe your animation, but like in the context of another control,
Mm-mm.
that's not something Animbot does. But
Right.
it's also not something it's trying to do and failing at, right? Like it's just it doesn't really do rig changing. It
Right.
just does a lot of key manipulation,
Sure.
right? And so let's see if I can scrub to a place that's good. Man, hang on. Oh man, it's so technical, but I love it. Like it's, I am so technical with this stuff. Yeah. Oh man, like there's a lot of stuff that he did with the tween. That he like built his own tweening process because like, wait, if you don't have a rig, like what's going on with your rig, like in between, your poses and stuff.
Right.
So he had to build like he basically built all this software to do it. Oh yeah, go to like 6 minutes and 47 seconds.
Six.
Oh yeah, and you're showing the
Yeah. 6 minutes 41
tweening.
seconds. Okay.
yeah
Oh,
exactly.
interesting. It's spine.
So yeah, so he's showing like, oh, if you could like move a control and then have it be like the parent rather than the child.
Huh. Alto reverse foot.
So this is like next level stuff. And
Yeah.
like I'm still thinking too, like eventually this is all gonna be solved with AI.
Yeah.
like that problem right there where it's like, wait, he's holding a sword and the sword is a child of his hand,
Yeah.
but then he wanted to like rock the tip of the sword, right? So it's like, if you think about how you would set that up in a shot, right, you would have to kind of like from ground zero make sure that there's a control on the tip of the sword while it's on the ground so that way you can rotate it, but still like the whole thing is constrained to his hand,
Yeah.
like in a way. But his system makes it to where you just select the tip of the sword and start moving it and everything just works.
Interesting.
Like it's nuts, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, but then solving the issue of like, well, what about interpolation and all that stuff? Then you have to worry about all the keys
Yeah. Yeah.
and how
Yeah.
all that works, and you're starting to work with dense data, and so you have things like Animbot being able to help out with that.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. How interesting. I'm just wondering, like, if there will be like layers. Then, as you change, like the parent and the child, are you also? Does that mean that there will be layers of data that you have to go through, or would it just live under just? Would it just live under just one, like, layer of data?
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like, that's the thing. The problem becomes, in order to. Okay, well, for his setup, he's trying to go for this like interpolationless animation, where it's like you have a variable frame rate. It's like Spider-Verse is perfect for this kind of stuff because what you really care about are poses.
Yeah.
And what the quickest way to these poses are things like that, where it's like you click the tip of the sword and you move it because that's how you just want to adjust that pose.
Sure.
But as soon as you have to interpolate, you have to bake it all down. But then you have to bake it back down to like an FK skeleton, or sometimes an IK skeleton. But the problem is, once you do that, you have to bake on ones in order to maintain all the accuracy. But then everyone's afraid of working on ones all the time. Like, what's the easiest way to work on ones? Well, what you do is you put it on an animation layer, and then you add like 3 keys, and you can kind of like offset gradually during like some maybe complicated stuff that's happening under the hood. So you start using the layers basically to make your animation start to like come alive, right?
Interesting.
And then this whole layered animation approach, is actually pretty strong.
Right.
So I will say, I just wanted to put out there, like, as far as teaching animation, I do not start here because this is an issue of like, you kind of need to know how layered animation works. Like starting by, you have like the bouncing ball of the hips. And then, you kind of work your way out from there, and you sort of design your poses while you're doing that. And eventually you start layering on things like, overlap, like the jiggle of the shoulders,
Right.
maybe some drag on the fingers and stuff. But like, it doesn't start there, right? It starts with your idea, and then it starts with like the one control, and then it just kind of starts building. But like, once you want to start solving, like as soon as you have a shot where like people are rolling and it's like, well, who's constrained to who, or like, how do I
Yeah.
set this up? Like, that's when you need this.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I do think there is a bridge to it where it's like you could do a simple acting shot, you know, of a person walking around a room delivering a line,
Yeah.
and still be able to do this kind of workflow.
Yeah.
Although this does seem like the nuclear option when sometimes all you need is a hammer.
Yeah.
So any tools that can make this, like getting to this, easier is A plus in my book.
Interesting.
So that's a long way to answer that question of like what's missing in Animbot, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
easier ways of like getting to this sort of like working with dense data, or working with like changing the context of the rig at any time to be able
Yeah,
to
you're
solve
right.
a problem, or like make a better pose, or
Yeah.
it's fix constraints. Like constraints are the worst thing
Oh, for
ever
sure.
in Maya.
Yep. Great. Yeah, I try to avoid constraint as much as possible. I just do fake constraint all the time now.
Yes,
Yeah.
me too.
Yeah.
Me too. But then like you run into problems where you're like, I want this fake constraint, but I just want it to be like on for like a bunch of stuff, and then I want to turn it off later. And it's like, well, at that point, I should just
Yeah.
make a constraint. And
Yeah, dude, I feel you. Like when you just talked about like rolling, like just a character rolling, and I just got a quick like image in my mind, or it's just video in my mind of like just me trying to animate a roll, and I'm just like just seeing like headaches of like how simple that move technically is, but like how like annoying it is to animate that.
Yeah.
It's just annoying.
and then you're wondering, okay, like, well, I should probably put my limbs into FK because that might be easier. But then, and then probably local and not world because that might be easier. But then at some point they got to go back to Ike, and you're thinking,
Yeah, dude.
yeah,
Dude, that's so
exactly.
annoying.
Oh, there's something that would be really beneficial for Animbot. Like seriously, if Alan is here and he's listening, please add this. He's got a space switcher in there, right? You can space
Yep.
switch in Animbot, but you can't IKFK switch in Animbot,
Right. Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
just switching your whole timeline.
Yep.
That would be super handy, and that is one thing that I miss.
Yeah.
Disney has like right built into the picker there where you can just like control shift, click that IKFK button, and it just does the entire timeline.
Yeah.
Oh, and it would do it on keys too. It wouldn't do it on one. So like,
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
get scared.
Yeah,
It's
I
fine.
love doing that because like there'll be so many moments you just like moving around it, but then there'll be a contact point at some point, and then you just like just run that, and then you're good. You know, it's so
Yep.
easy. Cool. Let's go over because you uploaded some stuff on your Sing Sketch stuff, so you can scrub through if you
Oh
want.
yeah.
Because I want.
Oh wow. You want me to scrub it? Okay,
yeah,
here.
dude.
Let's see. This is my first time like doing Sync Sketch, kind of like in this context.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we could run the reel that got me into Disney.
Ooh. Okay. Let's
If
do
you
it.
want to see it. This is like also this was 2012.
Okay.
2012. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'll hit it.
Okay, close the door so no demons come out of there. Hopefully none come. Oh, sweet God in heaven. Maybe not. Maybe not. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, God. No, no.
Nice.
I have to say, though, working in an underground laboratory is pretty cool. It kind of makes me feel like I'm an evil scientist. Okay, I better chill out. I don't want a repeat of Monday. Deep breaths.
Oh, I remember this. Nice.
I was in love with you. I think I was.
I'm not that young. Who's Alan, I wonder? Anyway, I'd love to chat more, but I gotta
Oh my God.
run.
You're in a lot of trouble, young man.
Brittany approaches her puck, adjusts her stance, looks over at me, quite annoyed, wonders to herself if I'm ever going to shut my mouth, realizes I'm not, and makes her.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's a lot of animation there. Great.
Yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah.
Oh
Wow.
my gosh.
Um,
Yeah, and it was. I remember getting in. I remember showing him this shot too, while I was applying for Taldev. But at the time, it wasn't rendered, and they were really confused. You're like, "What is he running from? What's going on?"
uh,
But all I did was render it, and I added the shadow, and they're like, "Oh, this makes all the sense now." Which kind of like clued me in. Oh, it context matters, right?
Mm.
Like if someone doesn't get it, that's not on them. That's on you.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
as an entertainer or as a an animator, if you're trying to go for an idea
Yeah.
and no one gets it, it's you didn't execute it right. It
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad idea. It just means you didn't get there.
Right.
So it's just spend more time and work at it.
Sure.
But I will say, like, if there's anything to do with your shots that you're animating where it has to be rendered in order for context to be understood, that's the exception where you should be rendering your shot before
Mm.
you put it on your reel.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. Someone actually recognized Tobuscus. Yeah,
I
there was a
see.
Let's Play he did of Amnesia, and there's like these really fun moments in there. So I was like, oh, I gotta clip that and animate it. That was really fun. And then Freeman's Mind for the other one.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think Noelia asked what. She was like laughing. She's like, "Where'd you get these audios? They're great."
Mhm. Yeah, Let's Plays on like Twitch or YouTube are
Mhm.
amazing, especially if they come with sound effects because you can like really work with those.
Yeah.
And depending on like how crazy they get, it's just I don't know. There's a lot of character in there.
Yeah. Going off of this, and knowing that this is the reel that got you into Disney, and now since like, you've been in the industry for so long, like someone asked, like what kind of things make shots stand out from the rest? Do you have any like tips, suggestions, or things that you did see it and you're like, yes, go for that, or things that you see too often, you're like, don't do that?
Yes. Okay, so there used to be this meta in terms of like coming out with when you're considering your reel, what kind of shots you want. You want like a chest up acting shot, showing plenty of lip sync and some emotion, and then you want a full body where there's some weight involved, so you can show mechanics. So, like that's what was taught to me,
Yeah.
a long time ago, and it's not like those have nothing to do with a reel nowadays.
Mhm.
What you want is you want a reel that shows primarily thought process and entertainment, and then it should be well done.
Yeah.
But like thought process and entertainment are so hard because so many people do animate shots that are generally kind of boring. Sad to say, where it's like if you watch it once and then you think to yourself, do I want to watch that again? And if you're kind of like like it didn't really do anything. I mean, and it could have been well executed, and we've seen so many shots that are really well executed,
Right.
but then like polished mechanics are good, but just kind of unremarkable, like nothing really happens in them that's
Right.
funny to see, or it doesn't have to be funny. Like shots don't have to be jokes. It's just jokes are like the easiest thing to
Right,
grok.
right.
Like in less than 10 seconds you can make people laugh, which is funny. But like to do a shot in which you're trying to get people to cry, like I have this one shot on my reel where here's a great example. Like you can switch back to it if you want to see it,
Yeah.
but like the girl at the door who's like, I was in love with you. It's like it's contextless, right? There's I don't know who this is. She's kind of like thinking about, this is a painful moment, and then she's sad, but like I don't know, I can't relate, and I can't connect. And I think that's kind of like a failure of this shot, where I'm trying to do an emotional, like close up, and like it just falls flat. It's like I don't care. Like I don't even care to see it again.
Yeah.
So things like that. But like the guy in the elevator who's like laughing like an evil scientist, like there's some moments in there that are kind of funny.
Yeah.
And I love that I put it up like shot in rough. My gosh, a shot that was like basically blocking got me into Disney.
Right.
That's nuts. And then yeah, like the best one being like the dinosaur at the beginning. Oh, but here, let me show you this thing. I'll turn it. I'll mute it real quick and just watch this dinosaur shot again. But I remember showing Michael Makarovich, who's the owner of Animation Collaborative, and I asked him to critique my reel, and he watched this shot and he's like, "Yeah, it's okay." And I was like, "So what would you say is like what's not good about it?" And he's like, "It's super even." And he started doing this thing where he like watch it, tap, nothing,
Okay.
tap,
Close the door so no
nothing.
demons come
Tap.
out of there. Hopefully
Nothing.
none come.
Tap.
Oh, sweet God in
Nothing.
heaven. Maybe not.
Tap.
Maybe not.
Nothing.
Oh God. Oh
Right,
God.
like-
Oh God. Oh God. Oh God. No, no.
Everything happens almost on the same beat, and there's no like exciting like rhythm to it. He almost like moves the same from phrase to phrase. He's like, your phrasing is super even. Like the first thing I would do is start bridging those gaps and like stretching areas and squeezing other areas, like areas in between, say like grabbing the door and then kicking it. It's like make that faster. And this other area where he like looks over, make that slower. Like right now, it's like it's very even. And I was thinking like, holy shit, he's right. Like every action also took the same number of frames, even though the spacing might be more drastic. Like he gets up on his toes, but it's like that move was the same as like him putting his hand on the door.
Right.
And he's like, there's no moment in here that feels like the most important moment with like the most amount of energy.
Yeah.
And so that was like this next level thing that like blew my mind. I'm like, dude, this shot got me into Disney, and you're just saying it's okay. Like, and there's so many things to improve about it. That's when I knew like animation is just like this sea of knowledge waiting to be discovered. You know, it's just there's islands out there of like this, like you could learn this and you could learn that, and yeah, you could spend it's a lifetime to master. You know, Glenn Keane talks about like still learning things about animation now, and he's been doing it for over 40 years.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
So, sorry, back to your question about like, what do you want to see on a reel, right? Like just make things that are like really interesting to watch. It can be emotional, right? But like, if it's going to be an emotional shot, you need enough time for context, right? You can't do that in 5 seconds.
Right.
You just want to be able to show context, get people in the mood, slow down. Make things just entertaining in general. Entertaining could be funny, could be interesting, emotional and stuff. And then the other thing, thought process. Moments in which you can actually see the character realize something, where like the gears in their head are humming along and all of a sudden they stop and then they have to start like moving the other way again. And it's like that is so rare to see in animation reels. I don't know why. But like as soon as you see it, it's like, oh wow, the character's like thinking. You know, and then a lot of the times all it takes is a pause. Like character just like stops and like stares at something without moving. Like that shows thought process, but no one does it because they're like, the character's not moving, he died. Gotta keep moving all the time. You know, so it's a it's a muscle that like it's hard to flex with animators, where it's like just stop the character every once in a while, you know, let them think.
I think students tend to make the mistake of like keeping the characters always moving. So throughout the show, there's like no breathing space. It's just like always has to be moving, right? Just blending into the next pose. And that's actually one of the questions that we got asked pretty often. Is like, how do you hold a pose, or like how do you make it so that they don't feel dead? Kind of like what you just talked about. Like how do you hold a moving pose? Do you have any tips in terms of like
yes,
like hitting a pose like sharp, but then what do you do after?
The best thing. So I remember back in the day, I would try to in order to keep a character alive, I would just randomly put in like movement, like just some wobbly keys. And I remember trying to do a shot in which a character was like sitting, but their spine was kind of like randomly moving, and it felt like they were vibrating or something. And it's like, why are they moving like that? It wasn't until years later, again at Disney, where I got this awesome tip that we learned on Frozen. Have your characters breathe. Remember to breathe. And that sort of like, it was another one of those like moments where I'm just thinking like, holy shit, there's this oh sorry for cursing. There's this other layer to characters living, you know, where it's like they have to breathe. And I had never really done a shot where a character was like out of breath and huffing and puffing. So like it, maybe that's an easy way to get you to think about it. But like characters who are just sitting there, if you just put them like a breathing cycle on them, or just some inhale or some exhale, that's enough to keep characters alive.
Students also have to understand that like breathing can be an acting choice too. Like you can actually make every breath matter, and then like you don't necessarily just have to keep it evenly spaced. Like there's variety in breathing that you could also apply in terms of timing and spacing.
Yes, and I love it when breathing is actually the acting choice. When a character has to like have like a sudden inhale or this a deep sigh, right? Like oh my god. Characters doing acting choices without saying anything is also gold. Right? Like it's so rare to see. Where just characters are pantomiming their thought process or their emotional state change.
Right.
So yeah, that's another one that I would say like you put that in your tool bag, pull it out every time you can. Characters breathing all the time. Just think about like take a pass that you're real, or maybe not shots that are buttoned up and gone forever, but like any shots you're working on right now, look at them. Look for areas of, okay, can a character like slow down here, or can I see breathing in this moment where they're still, right? There you go. And it could be like soft, it just should be appropriate for the level of energy that you got going on.
Yeah, for sure. And then you're talking about energy and timing and whatnot, which I think that's also something that a lot of students may struggle with in the beginning. I know I did. Like a lot of things could be even, like, and some of them, I think it was like this like random idea that we all got at some point of like keeping our curves clean, keeping our timeline clean, which I think kind of like faulted to this like even spacing, technically clean type of animation. So what would be your suggestion in terms of like tips on like pushing beyond your reference? Because like usually when students like animate to the reference, sometimes they stay very close to the reference, and it's hard for them to kind of like move away from it in terms of like spacing and energy aspect of it, because they can't move away from it because they're like that's like their blueprint. Right. What would be your suggestion on that?
Okay, so in terms of evaluating reference and figuring out how to map that onto your character, what I do is I actually learned this thing from Cameron Fielding, who has like one of the best reels that still holds up from like 2008. I wish I uploaded it. I didn't. But he talked about this on his website, where it's like he would take the extremes, and let's see, what was the best way to do it? You would take the timing of the extremes. So for example, like if a character had to do a weight shift where they were like here and then they moved over to here and then they came back like this, he would take, okay, on frame 1, they're here. And then the frame at which like their reference moves all the way to the right and then just starts to move back to the left, right? So like that apex where it's still, that would be like the next frame or keyframe. And then when the character like moved back this way and when it hit the apex on that side, that's a keyframe. And then when they move back, so it's like, it's always the arc extremes of an axis. Like imagine you're looking at your reference and you're seeing the controllers like around your hips. And so you would like say, okay, when they move X and they start moving back the other way at that apex, there's a key, right? You have to have a key in order to reverse the direction. Or you should at least. Please don't do the thing where you just overshoot with the tangent handle and so you have no idea where your apex is. But like if you do that, your timing's correct, you can start sort of like modifying the pose that they get into on the side, right? So that way it's like when the hips go out this way, if you want to push it, you know that on that frame you could move it a little further and it will still probably work. And for the most part, like he was right, where it's like as long as the timings of when your extremes hit stay the same, everything generally stays like cohesive. And so he moved it forward, so it wasn't just the hips, right? Like, and it wasn't just left and right. He would also do like for ups and downs in a walk cycle, or like in a big action thing where he's like swinging a sword or whatever. He would like look at the hips and he would try to evaluate, okay, like where's the key on what frame is the key, where he moves all the way to the left and he starts moving back to the right. It's like, that's a key. This is a key. When it goes to the very bottom and it starts lifting up again, it's like down here, that's a key. And then when it starts, so every time it reverses direction, then you go back in and you do rotation. So you start thinking, okay, like on this axis, you know, like if he's starting to rotate, but then he starts rotating back at that apex, there is a key, but just the key for rotation, not a key for translation and rotation, because you don't want to marry those two things. Right? So it's like, if you want to start pushing your poses, you would push the rotation, but only on that frame. And you would leave your translate curves alone. So it's like, I started doing this where like I would be really scientific and like analyze, okay, on this frame, here's a key for translate X. On this frame, it's translate Y. And you would start noticing, like in a walk cycle, for instance, the translate Y up and down curve, those keys do not land at the same time as the translate X curves do. Right. And if you keyed the entire controller every time there's a key, it would just be a super messy graph editor, and it would be almost impossible to be able to change that pose, because now you would have like a curve that kind of moved in these waves, but then had like a real height, tall spike. And that's the spike that you're trying to get rid of, because that sudden change in spacing is the thing that destroys your animation. So yeah, I started thinking about it like that, like channel by channel, where are the keys? And I started with the hips, and that actually gets me like 90% there. It's crazy. And then from there, you just start, exaggerating your pose, or maybe even take like a 2D sensibility pass to your animation, like your reference, where you say your character has to like move their arm up into the back, but then you're like, okay, but in that design, it's like, oh, it should be more like this, not this, right? And so just you would like on those frames where you need to adjust the like those keys to hit that pose, you would just move them until you hit that pose. You play your animation back, looks great. So it's like, I would say most of the time looks great. Like of course there's exceptions, but yeah, that was kind of like a big click for me in terms of evaluating reference and how to transcribe that to the character. Because the thing is, like, if you, and I tried to do this before, where you like overlay your character onto your reference and you matched frame for frame, like where the hips are and then where the head is, and like it's gonna come out like this like soupy mocap and it looks gross. That was like one of the first things I did at Animation Mentor. It's like, I'm just gonna copy my reference frame for frame. And it was bad.
Gotcha. So it seems like kind of like what you touched on is like a bit of like how you treat your workflow. So I'm actually curious if you could explain to everyone, like, I mean, I'm sure like depending on context, it may change, but can you kind of go over like what your workflow might be? So if you're starting from a shot from beginning to, I guess, to the end, is your workflow very like start at the hips kind of thing and then do like a energy pass, or do you start with like block posing? What's your workflow like?
Yeah, I try to do, oh gosh. It varies, because I get so many complicated shots that all have these different ways of being solved. Or like, okay, so I would try a sphere pass, but my version of the sphere pass is like grabbing the hips and then like if there's a way of grabbing the geometry of the body and then hiding the arms and the legs, that's awesome, because you can treat the body as basically like a beam, and then you could just animate that around, right? And the thing is, like, it's possible to just get, like, it's easier to see too as soon as you can hide the legs and hide the arms. They don't distract you at all. And even for the face, like if like my office mate at Disney, Dave Harden, would do this thing where he would turn the eyes inside out, and so they just looked white, like they kind of zombie like, but you weren't distracted by the pupils, because as soon as you see pupils, like your eyes just go there, right? So it's like a way of kind of putting a mask on the character. So if you can get the hips, chest, and head solved for like just the being of the body, right? Like moving through the scene in a good tempo, again, like keeping your rhythm exciting, so it's not like it has like a you know, or some kind of musical aspect to it, right?
For sure.
Or if it's just chaotic, right? Just making sure that it's always different. You know, so that way all your taps don't land on the same frame or the same distance between each frame. And then I'll solve for that and make that feel pretty good. And as soon as that's solved, then I just go back in and solve for the legs. Okay, so, and I will say, this is what I do now. Whereas like back when I was still not quite sure about body mechanics and everything,
Mhm.
I would do this, but then be really close to my reference and all that timing, but
Mhm.
then also go to the feet and the legs, basically turn the legs on, and then try to evaluate my reference and find the frames in which like the foot disconnected the ground, and then the frame
Mm.
where it touched the ground.
Yeah.
And as long as those frames were there, then like I could solve the legs, even though
Right.
the pose was slightly different.
Yeah.
I would make sure that the frame that the foot left the ground and then touched the ground,
Mhm.
where those keys were there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but at this point, and like I kind of alluded to earlier, it's like I figured out body mechanics. I don't necessarily need reference in order to like animate a walk or anything, because I understand kind of like where the legs need to be under the hips
Right.
at any point now.
Mhm.
It's like if you gave me some like crazy fantasy creature that we've never even seen, I'd be
Mhm.
able to animate it because like I understand how weight works.
Mhm. Yeah.
But that's after years and years and years of just doing it.
Yeah.
You'll eventually get to that aha moment where it's like you can animate dragons and fantasy creatures now because like, don't worry, you got this. And that was a great moment where it's like, oh wow, I can animate anything now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's scary because then it's like someone gives you like, can you have Maui turn into a hawk? And I'm like, I'll try to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then we figure it out.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Cool. Let me just go through some other questions that you might have. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, that's a cool question. Since now you got into the game industry, how do you think the game industry, animation industry will evolve? I feel like that's like a loaded question in the sense of like there's so much that could be answered in various ways of like how it could evolve. But what is your personal opinion in terms of like what you want to see and what you think we will see?
Yeah. Definitely like the types of stories that are being told, like video games again have this crazy way of engaging the audience where it's like you're interacting in a way where it's like the audience has to press forward, or they have to pull that lever, or they have to press E or hit A, or hit, go into that room. And it's like there's this, I don't know, there's this untapped potential, well, maybe a tapped potential, because again, there's so many games that I played that have had this like really resonating impact on me that I'm just now like I want to learn how to do. It's like I feel like I understand how to storytell, like do enough storytelling to like have a really cool action scene or an emotional moment, but then like how do you get like a person to feel like this specific roller coaster of emotions and then feel like they had agency the entire time they were doing it. So anyway, like that's what I'm really looking forward to learning in games, but like where the industry as a whole is going, I'm not really sure. I'm just thinking just more of that, like more interactivity. But I don't think it's like games versus movies. I think it's just a different thing. Like as soon as TV came around, it's like books didn't just disappear, right? Like people still love books, right? So it's just another medium we can all enjoy. But yeah, I think more and more agency and like ways of interacting with the world will get easier and easier, right? Like there's so many games now where it's more than just press a button, right? Like Flappy Bird has like the most limited version of interaction in any game, right? Because the game is literally just one button. But now it's like we have every game is coming out with like interactions with NPCs, and like having individual stories play out, like The Witcher. Like playing The Witcher is amazing because it's like you're a detective who can cast spells and you got swords and you're killing dragons and stuff. And it's like every game has this sort of like in-depth kind of feel to it. I don't know, it feels like every game, but I know it's like the more money you put into it, the more of all that stuff you can have.
Yeah.
Like I'm really looking for like Skyrim or the next Skyrim, Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
Or 5.
That's a 5. I think
the next one.
I think so. Is it 5 or is 5 the current one?
Yeah, I forgot.
I don't know.
But like those kinds of games, I'm really looking forward to. It's just storytelling, immersing yourself in that world. Shadowlands. Oh my yeah.
Have you ever had moments where like in a game where it like, I don't know, it like really like touched your like emotional aspect of it because of how close you are with the character so that like the actual action that happened to the character you got affected by, either the character died or whatever, you're like, oh holy shit, like that's a lot to take in.
Yes. Okay, so one, like off the top of my head, story game that does this flawlessly is Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. So the reason this game is so effective is because the way you play the game is part of the storytelling, which is a feat. Like, how do they do this? It is amazing. It's like somehow how you hold the controller in your hand and press buttons becomes part of the narrative experience.
Interesting.
And at the end of the game, the game's like 4 hours long.
Yeah.
Absolutely worth every penny. Hats off to the creators. I don't even know who made it, but like, holy cow, they did such a good job. But like the narrative experience, the way you interact with the game, like, are just melded perfectly. And it's like, oh, I want more games to do that. Like how you interface is actually part of the narrative design.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, because like that's, I feel like kind of like how we like talked about animations in general, like how I feel like a lot of what we're trying to do is just capture like human emotions and make it feel like just real. And in terms of games, like even games, like we can get specific with like the context of the character and also like who this character is and what are they feeling and why do they act this way, and you know how that carries everything to features and maybe even TV. Like and I think that's like basically what we're trying to tell the students is like it's important. Like that's the only way you can sell it, and that's the way you can get people to react to it, versus treating animation like animation, where it's like I'm making it move kind of thing, you know, but you don't know why.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen times where it's like a thing moves and it works and people are like, okay, cool. But then some like brilliant animator will come along and like make it move in such a way that is so interesting and compelling to watch that all of a sudden people are like, whoa, this is important. You know, like animation can do this thing where you just level up the experience or the shot or like whatever it is. It's like as soon as animation hits, boom, like there's these fireworks that go off and there's this next level like emotional connection that the audience gets when you watch it. You're just like, and especially if you can get it to the point where you're no longer watching animation, you're just watching that character or that creature or that, man, it could even be like a beach ball, you know, it's like just moving around and it's like, holy cow, you feel for it, right? There's ways to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And going off of that, like, yeah, what do you want to bring to the table to the students? Like, how do you want to, like, what is your passion behind teaching, and what do you wish to bring to Kyoshu?
Right. Yeah. So as I was explaining earlier, I feel like there's a trick to it. But no, sort of, because I learned that even though I understand it in my own way, there's more to it, right? Like there's a lot of things that I intuit, and I feel like the best way, well, I feel like I have an understanding, and all I need to do is practice like communicating it or describing it in different ways. And the thing that about teaching is really cool, that you get to like meet the students at where they are and then help them. Like I said earlier, you see how they're thinking about their animation, and you can sort of guide them to like, okay, but look at it this angle, you know, or you could solve this problem with like one key in the graph editor, right? Like, and I love these moments because every once in a while, like a student will like see that and just be like, no way, and like they might actually get that aha moment. It's rare, but I do think it's worth it, because when people work really hard on animation and they really just pour their all this like effort, time, and soul into it, like they'll become good, competitive even, right? And I love seeing that. Like man, there's something about There's something about like guiding people to actually achieve what they're trying to do.
Mm.
You know, like if a character's like person is running into a problem where it's like they're trying to carry another character on their back, and it's like it's like I'm trying to work with it. How do I even do this? And it's like here's some tricks. Like let me show you. This is how it handle it, and then have them say like, "Oh my gosh, that saved me like 8 hours." Like, oh my, I was able to just do this. And that's what's cool about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know all these tricks and stuff, and I just want to like help people, like giving them that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of also like why I am making tools on the side and then uploading them publicly, so that way it's like other people can mess with it and test it and stuff. Just because I feel like, I don't know, I want everyone to have like the tricks and the tools and like things like Animbot and stuff, because it's like, oh man, if everyone was equipped, again, the only thing that comes down to is your imagination.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's cool. Yeah. I think that's like a lot of things, like the similar variable that a lot of the mentors that have come in that we share is like, I think there's something fascinating about like what figuring out what is it that students don't understand within their workflow. Like what is it that gets them stuck? And I think for me, it's super exciting to see. No, it's not. I make it sound like it's exciting to see people failing, but I think it's cool to see when there are patterns of like that some students get into that may hinder them from like moving further, and that might be either ideas or like brainstorming, or how they animate. Like, is it like pose to pose that's not working for them? Could they approach it differently? So I think that's kind of like the excitement that I share with you in terms of like just trying to figure out how kind of like every like human's brain work, right? And seeing how they understand information.
We're all trying to teach or like we're trying to teach ideas and design and tools and like how to see and then how to think. Like animation has so many layers to it.
Oh, for sure.
I remember too seeing that like, well, the thing that the biggest thing that might hold people out of getting into a place like Disney might actually be their ideas. Because when it comes to say like mechanics and polish, that you could slide a little bit on it if your ideas are like really good. If like you're just entertaining and like your characters actually feel like characters and they're living and breathing and thinking and they have a soul to them, and it's like if you're hitting that, then it's like the animation could slip a little bit. But then it's like as soon as someone comes along, they have like all the ideas and their animation's like polished and like mechanics are just flawless. It's like yes. I remember one time asking Mike Makarovich like how, this is before I was at Disney and I was at Rhythm and Hughes. I was like, how do I be a Pixar animator? He's like, that's easy. It's like leaning in. What is it?
Yeah.
He's like, be the best person in the room. It's like,
easy.
yeah, that's such a smug answer.
Yeah.
Like, but it's kind of true. Like when you're in the real review room, it's like your reel up against all these other reels.
Right.
And they got to pick one.
Yep.
You got to be the best person in the room.
Yeah.
And the only way you can do that is if you put in all the effort that you can. Like, that's the only way you can attempt it, to try, is to like show up with all of the effort. And the thing that I would see as far as like the things that keep students like back and students ahead. So not just getting into studios, but like how students move and improve or don't improve is the ones who put in a lot of time and effort tend to move ahead really fast. And they tend to like just never stop trying, and they're always putting their energy into it, and they'll always improve, and they run into those aha moments faster at a faster rate.
Yeah.
Like I used to think about it like when you're trying to become a professional animator, you're applying to a studio to be a professional animator, right? And so they need to see you kind of at the level as roughly as everyone else at that studio, or at least the potential to be, right? Like if you're going into the
Sure.
television program or something.
Mhm.
And the only way you can do that is if you're literally putting in the hours of a professional animator,
Right.
right? So if you're animating like, look, I could only do 2 hours on Saturday because I had a busy week. It's like, no, you're a week behind. It's not impossible to catch up, but like, someone over here was working 40 hours this week.
Mhm.
Like the 38 hours ahead of you in terms of how
Yep.
much, like effort and work they put in.
Yeah.
And granted, there's always these levels of like, well, is it good work or is it just lots of work, right?
Yeah.
But chances are, the people who put in all the effort and time just will pull ahead.
Yeah.
So that's like it's something I'm always trying to push. It's like put hours in.
Yeah.
Right? Like even if you're not sure, like just work on it. Just keep working on it. Keep it in your mind. Keep thinking about it. Just
Mhm.
keep chewing on it. Solve that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Cool. Yeah. No,
that's all I have to say about that.
yeah, I think that's like something like we could always like talk a lot about. It's just making sacrifices and putting those hours, because I think a lot of students are looking for ways to be like, oh, like basically looking for shortcuts to like get into the industry, and there's really
Right.
no easy way. Honestly, it's like you gotta struggle. Like it's not going to be all fun in games in terms of like, I think you can definitely have fun with your shot, but making yourself in front, like getting yourself to sit in front of your computer is like definitely the hardest part for sure. But and like how you pointed out, it's like even though you take a break, that doesn't mean hundreds of other animators who might be just as talented, or they might be putting like 40 hours while you're putting only 1 hour for that week, so
Right.
I think people have to realize in that context of like the time doesn't stop for you, like time just keeps moving, so you can take
Yep.
as long as break if you want, and the rest that you need, granted, like have a healthy schedule, but at some point like you're gonna have to make sacrifices. It may be this week or next week, or you can just spread it out, but yeah, so
And it does take time too. Like I didn't get to Disney until I was like right before I turned 30. So I'm kind of late to the party, I feel like.
Sure.
And I remember one of my favorite animators from Pixar telling this story. I think it was like Aaron Hartline, or I don't know, like one of those guys, and they were talking
Mhm.
about like they didn't make it to Pixar until they were 40 something.
Wow.
And it's like they've been in the industry for a really long time and always trying and stuff. And so it's like it's it's a different road for everybody.
For sure.
But like if your ship is pointed in that direction, you'll eventually make it.
Mm-hmm.
It might take a long time, but you'll make it.
Yeah.
So just keep your ship pointed and keep the effort going.
Yeah.
But like the more effort you put into it, the faster you make it. That's for sure.
Yeah. And someone was saying that in the chat that work and improving the reel at the same time is hard.
Yeah.
With going off
Yes.
of that, do you have tips on like, especially as a student, like work-life balance between like their actual like work to like help pay the bills versus animating at home? Are there any? I know there's really no secret to it. It's like you just gotta do it, but
Yeah.
anything that might encourage someone to like, after they get home from like this like shitty work they had, and to get in front of the computer, anything that
Yeah.
might help their mindset to like kind of switch to enjoy being in front of their desk to animate.
Oh man. Like if I could bottle that and sell it, I'd be a billionaire.
Oh, yeah.
There's just something about motivation, right? Like how do you the issue is motivation.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not motivated to get home and then like, man, I'm just gonna open up Maya and like start working on my shot. Like if you're struggling a lot and then feeling like kind of discouraged about your shot, I know that can put you in a bad mindset, and it's hard to like crack it open, like work on it, because it feels like a chore.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like the trick is to like not see it as a chore and see it as like, oh man, I get to like animate this thing that I'm excited to animate.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
It's a tough
have to say
question.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Like for me, it worked by getting inspired by seeing good animation. Seeing bad animation for whatever reason would help me, because I'm
Yeah.
like, I could do better than that. Like, and I would try. Like I would do it. I would open up my shot and be like, that guy's jumping and it looks terrible. Like, oh, I'm animating a jump right now. Look how good I'll make this jump. Like 4 hours later, and it's like,
Yeah.
But like, I feel like I was close. I'm really close. I'll try again tomorrow, and like I'd be excited to try again. Oh, okay. Something that would help is keeping your shots short, like small, right? If you have, okay, this is something I noticed for myself. If you have like a 20-second shot, it can get really heavy really fast, and not in a way where it's like Maya slows down. I just mean like cracking it open, you watch the whole thing, you're like, oh, man, there's so much to work on, right? And I like digesting my shots in sort of phrases. So like every time a character does a thing, you think about that as a phrase, right? So can I pull up my old reel again?
Yeah, here, let me pull up this, and you're good.
Okay. And you can mute it on your end so you don't hear it, but like so for this shot, when I was working on it, I would do this secret. I think it was Ken Fountain taught me this. He's like, cut your shot up into chunks, like of individual parts, and the parts are like every time there's an action. So it's like for here, the shot starts where he takes a step forward and he drops the bucket. Boom. That's like an action. That's a phrase, right? Something happened right there. I would actually crop Maya to like that and be like, okay, I'm just gonna work on that tonight. That's it. And the thing is magical because now it's like, what is it, 65 to 100,
Right.
35 frames.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can work on 35 frames. You know, if it like kind of lightens the load, the shot's not like this huge epic anymore. It's just like 35 frames.
Yeah.
Okay, I can do 35 frames, right? And it's like, even if I make, okay, my goal is to like make that 35 frames look really good this week. Here's the thing, spending a whole week on 35 frames, right? There's a lot you can do there. We talk about like what's the quota at Disney, right? It's like a roughly 80 frames, somewhere between 72 and 80 frames a week. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not like before you're a Disney animator, you're not a Disney animator. So you're like, all right, so they're doing 80 frames a week. 35 is, a little less than half of that. Like, can I do 35 frames a week? Might be, maybe, right?
Yeah.
So you try it. Like, you kind of like, you lower the scope a little bit. You bring in the goalpost just a little bit. But the cool thing is like, you might be able to actually kick it across that goalpost. Like you might actually be able to score that goal. And then the next week, you do the next 35 frames or whatever, right? And the way I would do it is like, okay, like, well, after that, let's see, how do I do it? So then it's like, okay, from here to like picking it up to, and maybe not even getting to the door, right? Because like this is a whole other action, like standing up, then taking this step and then slamming, right?
Sure.
So maybe it just be like that and scratching, right? So there we go, boom. It seems so small, but it's like, okay, 110 to 135. Oh, it's only 25 frames. And it's like one thing. It's like, I can animate that one. Anyway, so you can see where I'm going with this. It's like, break your shot down into little chunks and like put on the blinders, like the horse blinders are like, okay, I don't see the rest of the shot. I just see this little action. Does it work?
Yeah.
And every time there's like a physical action too, like kind of a body mechanics thing, like a fall or a lift or something, you would just make it that and just play that until it works. And as soon as it starts to work, I guarantee you, like you'll spend a lot less time on this action overall if you just like make your shot 25 frames, finish those 25 frames, or is the best as you can. And then you move on to the next one, and you just keep doing that. And you march down until you get to the end of the shot, and then you just play it all back. And I guarantee you, like, it won't look perfect. Like, there might be like some little hitches in spacing here. So you can go to those seams every once in a while and kind of like fix them up just a little bit, and you'll be like a lot farther ahead. And it helps keep the motivation up because, again, you're not lifting this whole like 200 frame thing. You're just lifting a 25 frame thing.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that'd be my. That's not like the silver bullet cure all, but
sure.
I think that would probably be like the best thing I would do for myself.
Yeah.
And I would do that at work too, because I would get shots where it's like, here's 300 frames of character like running and stumbling, and all. It's like, okay. Well, you don't look at all 300 frames every time you work on it.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah. No, I think you bring up a good point about like time management, and I think that's difficult for students to kind of grasp in the beginning because like they don't know how to like schedule their time out. And then kind of like what you talked about is kind of like making your goals tangible, right? Because like when you have like this big picture goal and you're trying to just tackle it all at once, I think it's like just daunting,
Yeah.
and you don't want to get in
No
front of your
shock.
desk. Yeah. And then and yeah, kind of like how you said, like just breaking it down into like just bite-sized chunks where it's more realistic that you can get it done within one night or even a day. And who knows, maybe that might motivate you to continue on to the next chunk. So you're like, oh, maybe I can just continue on to the next chunk instead of saving it for another day, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you start like an hour in, you're like, that 35 frames looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Just move on to the next one.
Yeah.
It's okay. And you can just chalk it up as like success. I did it. And if you're like the kind of person who likes to make lists and cross them off,
Yeah.
like go through your shot, do all the sections. And Animbot, by the way, has this like really cool feature where you can like bookmark,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know, like
you're
make real ranges bookmark, and then just like chalk them off, like start crossing them. Hey, I did that, did that, did that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Cool. Let's see. Are there anything that you wanted to talk about within your sync sketch? I know you have a bunch of stuff, and I feel like a lot of the questions are answered. So like anything that before we close off, like some shots that you might want to share, and then you can do the closing statement.
Oh wow, closing statement. I didn't even think about that. Okay. As far as sync sketch goes, let's see. I will say, I saw this video a while back that was a clip by Yuri Lamenti talking about like everything's a bouncing ball. Have you seen this?
I think so, but you can.
Yeah, it's from another school.
Oh.
So I won't mention it,
Okay,
but
okay.
like you can Google like everything's a bouncing ball, Yuri Lamenti,
Uh-huh.
and it's really handy because he actually pulls up some Disney clips and he's like, check this out.
Yeah.
What? But I loved his visual overlay that he did, and so I started doing it to some of my shots. So for example, let's see if this will show. Nice. Okay, cool. So I'll play this. This is a shot that I animated in Big Hero 6.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
Go-Go. And basically, like, the bouncing ball is the disc, right? Like, the visual, like, sort of hot, like, the point of focus is her
Yeah.
disc. And I wanted to make sure, like, that had, like, the smoothest arc
Mm-hmm.
possible. And I remember coming up with this sort of, like, groovy, sort of, like, spiral later toward the end of the shot.
Mhm.
As I was, like, kind of, like, coming into the finish line, I drew this trying to make sure that it was like as smooth as possible. It's a little wobbly, but like then I would go through and I'd scale up the disc to make sure it stayed within those edges every frame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool.
And that was like really fun to see, like, okay, as soon as I did that and then I hit play, it's like it was smooth.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about something moving perfectly on screen space that, so this disc ignores the camera, right? Like you can kind of tell that the camera's moving. It's like dropping and then pulling back, moving to the left and then pushing forward. Like, but this disc, the way it travels through this scene is ignoring all of that.
Right.
But like it feels so good because of how it's moving in screen space.
Yeah.
And it just behaves like a bouncing ball. You're wondering like, well, how did you come up with that? It's like every pendulum move, right? Like as it's swinging by, goes faster, you know, when it's at the bottom of that arc, and then it slows down at the side, and then same thing, like from here over to there, you know, like hitting yokai is the same thing.
Yeah.
So you just treat everything like a bouncing ball.
Yeah.
At the bottom of it, and it's like it just works. Oh wait, so here's another example. This one is not my shot. This is actually animated by Patrick Osborne, who is a director now. But he was also one of the really best animators at Disney, I think. And he did this like awesome shot of Go-Go just coming in. And so I like tracked these spheres on like her hips and her head, and just watched this relationship of like how they moved in. Right. And the thing is like, oh my God, it's just like super smooth bouncing ball motion.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
love that last clip too. So seeing those,
yeah, it's awesome.
and so the trick is like, okay, so in Maya, what you'd be trying to do is like every time the hips move and
Mhm.
settle, it would sort of settle like this bouncing ball. Well,
Right.
okay, and in this case, not bouncing off the ground because they never hit the ground. They're
Mhm.
cradled by the hips. So there's a little bit of a slow in there.
Mhm.
And it never bounces off the hips, right? Like it slows in and it's caught.
Mhm.
But the way it moves, how it has this acceleration and then this like slow down and this catch and release kind of thing, it's everything feels like it's coming from the same like
Yeah.
amount of force and amount of gravity, and it feels very convincing. Even the walk out like is very nicely,
Yeah.
you know, it's separated and it's got that relationship to it.
Yeah. It's nice.
And there's something also really cool about this shot. Like this shot has, it's so simple, but it has like so many cool things in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has this way that Patrick likes to animate, is that there's this musical feel to
Mhm.
what he does. So like every follow through becomes the antic to the next thing, right?
Mm.
So it's like as she comes in, this like little endo stoppy, right? But
Mhm.
that's a follow through, right? So as she's like bike's tilting up onto the nose and starts to swing around, that
Mhm.
becomes the antic to then dropping.
Yeah.
And then as she puts her foot on the ground and her head and her like hips and everything is falling from the weight, like being caught from the weight of landing like that, that downward momentum turns into the antic of like getting the other leg up,
Yeah. That's
and then
awesome.
dropping that leg, and her hips turn into the antic of picking up the bike. And then like even going from like the bike at the very top turns into the antic of moving forward
Mhm.
and grabbing the disc. It's like everything like perfectly chains into the next action,
Yeah. It's awesome.
and it just ends up being this like musical shot.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And it yeah, and I could see that like if I were to animate this, and this is like Big Hero 6, so like a little bit, my mechanics would be a little rough. I would probably want to resolve every action before continuing the next
Sure.
action,
Mhm.
rather than like bouncing from action to action.
Mhm.
I don't know, there's something about it.
Yeah.
And then it's not like even, it's not like music, not steady staccato.
Mhm.
Like each action has a slightly different tempo to it, so it's also got that texture going on. Yeah, it's like all these things about it are so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, like, and again, the whole thing was like everything's a bouncing ball.
Yeah.
Hips. I like to track for myself like the hips, chest, and head,
Mhm.
because that's an FK chain that all starts from the hips and goes up to the head.
Yeah.
And if you solve for that, legs and arms are usually like a small problem.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, that's super cool to see. Yeah, I think that's like one of the things that I like, try to tell students is like, yeah, just kind of like treat everything like a bouncing ball in terms of like if you were to just parent the ball right here in your animation, hide everything, play it. Do you like that energy that you're watching, right? And
Yeah.
then
Yeah,
a lot of cases like probably not. So it's great to just like simplify, because I feel like when we see body mechanics, so daunting because we see all the limbs and all the parts. It's like, how does that work all together? When you just start breaking it down by like big shapes, just like a bounce, just like a ball, and then you kind of just start seeing at least the timing and energy aspect of it. And if you kind of get that appealing, then it just makes it so much more easier, because like that looks good. So it's like, how do you figure it out to just fit into like what you kind of already like set up for yourself? So I think that's pretty
Yeah.
cool. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, that's cool.
It's good, man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's probably as much as I'd like to share.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously the students who join your class, they will get a lot more of your information
yeah.
and theories and whatnot.
I have a whole lecture on like how to. The thing is like a 2-hour lecture, and it's animating fast and slow. It's like how to do keep alive and all that like idle stuff.
Yeah.
What's the best way, like the tips and tricks to do all that,
Yeah.
and then duplicates and smears.
Hmm.
Like and this is a fun thing. Whereas like later on in my animation career, I started challenging myself to animate every action with as few frames as possible. And this, because like I noticed all my stuff on like Big Hero 6 and Frozen kind of felt like a little naturalistic, or something
Sure.
about it where it's like just like maybe too many in between frames.
Mm.
And I remember hearing from a friend, they said like, try to animate everything as fast as you can.
Interesting.
And it's like, really? Like even slow, like naturally slow actions, like picking a glass of water off the table. It's like, yeah. Try to spend as few frames as possible during an action of anything,
Mhm.
and spend more frames in those held poses.
Mm.
Right? So like usually those held poses are like have that slow in and slow out feel to them.
Yeah.
But like the more time you spend in the poses, the more important they become, right? So then they become more golden.
Yeah.
And then all of the mechanics and like movement of in betweening those things become more interesting to solve, because then you start to get to do things like smears and duplicates,
yeah.
right? Because like the only reason you would ever put in duplicates is if your character's moving so fast that like 3 frames just doesn't describe enough of an action, an arc or an action there.
Right.
So you put in duplicates so that way you can superimpose frames on each other.
Mhm.
And then same thing with smears. Smears is like filling in the gap of spacing between like 2 frames that are just too far apart. Anyway,
Right.
I go into like more of that in my lecture series. but,
Gotcha. No, that's super cool.
yeah, that is a fun challenge when you can get to it.
Huh. No, I like that. Yeah, I think that's the habit we can get ourselves into, and I definitely have noticed that because like, it's so easy to like, because at that point you're almost like an auto drive when you're like just having the timing kind of like kind of push here and there, but then when you like kind of what you talked about, like when you like really push the timing aspect of it, then you have to like figure it out in a different way. It's like, well, do I do a smear or multiple to get this to read? Because I like the energy, but how do I figure that out? So that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. So what I like to do, take out frames until you break it, and then add a frame. And then if that's too much, maybe what you need to do is break it again and then put in a duplicate.
That's pretty
So
cool.
it's like, yeah. So, but the problem with like, if you want to do duplicates and smears and all that stuff, you have to animate faster. I don't mean
Mm,
like, opening up Maya and then setting keys as fast as you can. It's like the action of like grabbing something.
Yeah.
Try to do it in 3 frames,
yeah.
right? Don't do it in 10.
Yeah.
Do it like less than half of what you're doing now. Everything you're doing, try to do it twice as fast, or do it like fast enough where you break it and then start adding in frames. Like have those frames earn their way back in.
Interesting. No, that's awesome. That's cool. Yeah, I hope students that sign up with you, like, yeah, get to just absorb all that information, because I think that's awesome to like just to push for, because I think those are type of stuff that doesn't necessarily like are taught in a way.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I'd be curious as a student's perspective what they'll learn from you. So with that said, our last closing statement, because our enrollment will open officially on Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So for anyone watching and anyone who might watch the recording, you can literally go to the website now and apply. You can send in your application. You choose the mentor that you're curious to or you're interested in. And then on that day, when enrollment opens at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, you'll receive an email with a password link, because right now you can't access it because it's restricted. So you'll get the password, and then you'll be able to choose the mentor you want to enroll with, and Daniel Klug will be one of them. So if you are interested with Daniel, yeah, make sure you guys apply. And so Daniel, as a closing statement, yeah, are there like anything that you wanted to share for potential students to come, and what you how you want to help them, and what you want to provide as a mentor for the upcoming term?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Let's see.
like every student has a different, like, because like some students like this type of mentor, some students like this type of mentor because they do this and that. So maybe you can get more into that.
Yeah. So the way I like to teach is to kind of like ground people in the mechanics as much as possible. So like making sure that you understand like how to do weight transfers effectively, and how to start an action and stop an action, and like competently move like controls through 3D space, which I think it's a hard thing to do. But that's also my specialty. So and like any kind of like mechanical stuff, action. Like if you want to do an action scene,
Mhm.
let's do it because that is my bread and butter. Sword fighting, let's go. um, but yeah, like if you run into technical issues, if you ever worry about like, oh, man, I don't understand animation layers or constraints or any of that stuff, like I have some pretty good ways of explaining it and kind of walking you through the process and even showing you the power of it in a way that feels easy to understand. So
Cool.
if you're curious about that, kind of like taking advantage of like the tools and the technology to sort of like up your animation game, for sure, like come with me. Or if you just like action and mechanics in general and you just like want to get your stuff feeling weighty and snappy, like for sure, let's do it.
Gotcha. Oh, that's awesome. Cool. So again, thanks everyone for showing up, although we got disconnected for a little bit. But yeah, thanks for sticking with us. Yeah, intermission for sure. Yeah, and just keep us in mind, keep Kyosho in mind, and in case you are a current student, you can always let others know about it, because again, we are very like a small kind of like mentorship thing that gets kind of spread through word of mouth, which is kind of like awesome because it's like very humbling to get students to talk about how awesome their experience was with the mentors, and the relationship they actually create with the mentors is also awesome, that you guys connect on a more personal level too, which is cool. So yeah, we're excited to have you for new and old. So with that said, we'll close off the Q&A here. So thank you guys for coming, and we'll see you later.
Thanks everybody.
See you guys.